Wayne's World Halloween episode Ramblin' Podcast.
And here's to the beginning.
I'll drink to that.
Why, Johnny Ringo.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
I know exactly what I'm doing, and I can change it at any time.
I'm your huckleberry.
Outlaw loose and running came the whisper from each lip, and he's here to do some business with the big iron on his hip.
Incoming the Ramblin' Podcast, with your hosts, Conway Titty, and Stoney Robbins.
Howdy, hey cowpokes, and welcome back to the episode of the Ramblin' Podcast. I'm your host, Garth Algar. Joined with me is...
Wayne Campbell.
And we're ready to party on.
Party on, Garth.
Party on, Wayne. I've been practicing that, okay, guys?
Oh, the smile.
You gotta... And then you... Been practicing my Garth smile. Anyways, happy Halloween! Ooh, spooky, scary skeletons. Obviously, if you don't know where this movie's from, you're stupid. But we are Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World. I've had this idea in the list since we started the podcast. It was in my little notes of one day we're gonna do a Wayne and Garth themed episode, and I didn't know when it was gonna be. I was like, okay, well, last year we did a whole aliens and cowboys themed for our Halloween episode, and this, I decided, what better way than to be Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World, because it just fits so well, and that's what I decided to do. So checking that off the list. And of course, this is a video podcast, so make sure you are watching. If you're in your car, don't be watching unless you're a passenger princess, then you can definitely watch. But this is not really, I mean, I guess it is kind of a listening episode because of what we're going to be doing today. But it definitely is, it's more of a watch because we're dressed up in costumes and you need to see what we look like.
Yeah, but other than that, it's going to be just like a normal episode, us just giving y'all some stuff to listen to.
And as you can tell, Stoney hates video episodes. He
I'm
absolutely,
not a fan.
absolutely loathes video episodes. And something new, Stoney, you have a new look. You have quite a new look. Yes, I did make him shave his face for this episode because Wayne Campbell does not have facial hair. And I like to be specific with my outfits and choosing and choices of everything. So he's not too happy. But you're growing a beard, right? You're going to grow your winter beard. So it's perfect.
Yeah.
Have a fresh start so you can grow his winter beard in. It works out well.
I'm not very happy about it. As you can tell, I look like a giant baby, and it's not fun.
You don't have to have your sunglasses on this episode
Nope.
either.
Nope.
Stoney is just
Not
hating it
fan,
right
not
now.
a huge
Absolutely
fan.
hating it. So on today's episode, since it was the last episode of the Halloween season, we've talked about ghouls and goblins, ghosts, superstitions, cryptids,
Little stations.
little stations. We've talked about quite a few things, and we've heard your guys' ghost stories, which are also pretty crazy. I love hearing your guys' little add-ins onto once you listen to the episode and you like send it in. Those are really fun. So keep doing those. Those are really fun for us to read. But yeah, the ghost stories were quite crazy. You guys are insane. And some of that shit I was like, I believe you. That's pretty scary. But, so yeah, if you want to listen to the ghost episode, that was last week. Like I said, this is our last Halloween episode, last video episode for a bit. We usually only do like one a year. Maybe technically two a year because one for the anniversary and one for Halloween. I forced Stoney to be on camera every once in a while, and you can see how much he just, like I said, he just loathes being on camera versus I like it. I don't mind it. I will look stupid anytime and not care. So,
I just don't like being on camera. That's all it is.
yeah. So on today's episode, we are going to be reading scary stories.
Creepy pastas.
Spooky ooky ghost tale.
It didn't pick it up.
I didn't pick it up. Do your what was it? Your adult link.
Yeah.
Perfect. So that is what we're gonna be doing today: is reading some creepypastas, ghost stories. If you guys don't know what creepypasta is, it's literally an entire website that is at what fan fiction places have. It's just people writing their own stories and posting them, and then they get voted on by the internet and other people. And some of them are really good. Some of them
And most of them end up on Reddit.
yeah. Some of them are really stupid. Some of them are really good. So I filtered through some Halloween ones. I only know 2 of them, and those are the ones that I'm going to be reading. Stoney only knows 2 of them, which are the ones he's going to be reading. I don't know what his stories are. He doesn't know what mine are. You guys obviously don't know what ours is. So, what better way than to, me just burping over here.
It's like, you gotta stop doing that. Just
Pushing through a burp.
pause
No.
and then speak.
So, yeah, what better way than to dress as Wayne and Garth and tell you guys spooky stories for this Halloween? It seems fun in theory, and Stoney is hating every moment of this. Okay, without further ado, let's change the mood lighting. Let's get the camera a little closer, and let's play some nice
Suspenseful.
free music that won't get us any strikes on any platforms because it's free. Okay.
Free 99.
Here we go. Hello, hello, my sweet child. Hello, hello. Where are you going? We're gonna set the mood a little bit. Gonna have the, like I said, nice little suspensey music. Coming in closer, come hang out with me a little bit. All right? Get all personal. I look insane, but I'm doing this for you guys. Don't forget that. So, this is back of my neck. I wear wigs all the time, but like this is a very itchy wig. We each have 2 creepypasta stories, and I thought this would be such a great way to get in the mood, the scary mood. And I love the bit on Wayne's World where Wayne has the flashlight underneath him, and he's like, "I'm a little leprechaun," and Garth's like, "No," and he's like really terrified of it. That's what inspired me to do this whole episode. So that's also kind of why we're doing it, because I was like, "Oh, that's really great," because Garth really hates scary stories, and Wayne just scares the shit out of him the whole time, and he gets really annoyed in the little flashlight thing. And I thought, oh, we could do a little flashlight thing, and I would just have a glowing underglow, all of this all up in my nose, and I was like, that's a really bad idea. I probably shouldn't do that. So, party on, Wayne. You're Wayne. I am Garth. Without further ado, get your listening ears open or your eyeballs even wider if you're watching. And let's get into the first story. It is Stop Laughing! We're being scary and spooky, and you have to take it seriously. You have to take it scary, spooky, skeletons, scariness. Shh, be quiet. The first story we have is titled Don't Answer the Door at 9 p.m. on Halloween. It was Halloween night. My parents had just left with my little brother to go to a party at the middle school. I didn't go because I was in 11th grade and just spent the day drowning from essays and tests. So I really wasn't in the mood to spend my night watching kids scream in terror from people in rubber masks and styrofoam skeletons. Once they left, I hopped on the couch and scrolled through the horror channels. I eventually found a movie that seemed interesting. It was titled The Not So Good Dead, directed by Sam Amy. I put the bright orange candy bowl on the porch and started to watch the movie, but I couldn't focus. I was too worried about my family. Halloween was never my favorite holiday. Even trick-or-treating never really piqued my interest. Not even as a kid. Especially with all the disappearances happening in the city, the Halloween before, 5 teenagers and an entire family went missing. 2 weeks later, the police found the body of a missing teenager. If you can even call it a body. They were missing their head. And they were also missing their intestines. The police say it was most likely an animal like a bear or a wolf that basically came down from the mountains and caught them on their way home. I don't buy it. As I was stuck in my train of thought, the grandfather clock my dad kept struck 9. I didn't think much of it until I realized that my family should have been back hours ago, and my mind started to assume that the worst had happened. I sprung up from the couch and raced to my cell phone, but before I could reach it, I heard a knock on the front door. No kids should have been out at that time, so why was someone knocking on the door? If it was my dad or mom, they would have had house keys, so they wouldn't need to knock. So it must have been some kids ding-dong ditching houses. That was my thought until there was a second set of knocks. I ignored all of my instincts and decided to call my dad. With the dial of the first 3 numbers, there was a loud bang on the door. I continued to dial until a loud, rapid banging started hitting the door. Bang, 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 bang. I frantically dialed the rest of the numbers. I pressed call, and what I heard made my blood run cold. I held the phone up to my ear. No service. As I removed the phone from my ear, I noticed that the banging had stopped. I turned to look at the door and froze. Looking at me from the mail slot of the front door was a glassy, white eye. When our eyes locked, the mail slot closed, making a loud clink noise that echoed through the house. I then heard footsteps walking away from the door into the distance, but I could still feel its ominous presence. I thought it was over. Then the power to the house was cut off. My reaction was to kneel and to keep quiet. What was probably just seconds felt like hours in the darkness of this empty house. When I got a hold of my nerves, I slowly and quietly stood up. I then collected all my strength I had and said, Who's there? When I finished the question, footsteps rushed to the door and they started banging, kicking, and even scratching at the door. Whatever it wasn't going to stop until it got me. That was clear. I started to take a step back. Then it let out a loud screeching noise that was a mix of a bat and a deer. No human being could make that noise, as it was so terrifying. The door started to crack and bend from the force of the creature. I didn't know what to do, but I didn't have time to decide. The door broke off the hinges, falling to the ground, making a loud sound of wood hitting tile. I ran into the kitchen to arm myself. I grabbed a knife from the drying rack and I turned around to see what had broken down the front door. Nothing. There was nothing there. Just the broken door. But that wasn't the part that scared me. What scared me was beyond the door. There was nothing. No light. Nothing in the houses, not even in the street. It was just this thick fog that swallowed my entire home. There was then a sound from above my head. A scraping sound. Claws ripping up the drywall of the ceiling. I didn't need to look up because the creature dropped in front of me. It wasn't human. Its flesh was falling off the bone. Its arms were so long they were touching the floor, and a horrid smell of roadkill filled my nose. As I struggled not to vomit at the sight, I noticed it wasn't looking at me. It was facing up and looking at a freshly made claw marks in the ceiling and smiling with genuine joy. It then made a sound that still haunts my soul to this day. It was a whining sound, almost like an animal, but at the same time, not even close. I tried to take a step back, but with the creak of the floorboard, the creature snapped its neck downwards and looked at me. I was so caught off guard that I fell back. When I hit the ground, the noise stopped, and I looked up. Now I could see its face. Its skull was wrapped in rotting flesh and dark veins. I vomited from the mixture of sight and smell. The creature then let out a cackle, almost like a hyena, as it found enjoyment from seeing me in that state. Once I was done being sick, I dashed for the stairs, but before I could make it to the first step, the creature, with what felt like a truck, slapped me with the back of its skinny, rotted hands. I was sent flying to the other side of the kitchen. With no doubt, I knew my arm was broken. I looked to my right and saw the knife. With the creature slowly walking up to me, I grabbed the knife with my non-broken arm. I pointed the knife towards the creature, ready for the end. I closed my eyes, accepting my fate, counting my last breaths. I hear the creature, smelling the air. Whatever scent the creature caught was making it salivate. The creature then looked towards the cabinet and rushed it with animalistic movements. With both hands, the creature ripped the cabinet door off its hinges. Cereals and snacks went flying across the kitchen. The creature then pulled out an old bag of candy corn that no one ate because candy corn is disgusting. It then starts walking towards the broken front door. Before the creature makes it to the door, it stops. It looks at the puddle of vomit on the floor and starts playing with it. It then picks up a piece of chocolate from the puddle, looks at it, and says in my own but demonic voice,
Candy.
The moment that the creature left, the entire house shook. I stumbled to look out the window and see that the fog had dissipated. My legs finally gave out, and I collapsed to the floor. While I was fighting to stay awake, I heard the shattering of a window. It was my newly widowed neighbor. I could hear his screams and him begging for his life. I then heard the slashing and ripping of flesh along with screams of agony. I then blacked out from exhaustion. I was then woken up by the frantic calling of my dad. Are you okay? I couldn't see well, but I could make out the tears in my dad's eyes and the silhouette of my mom and brother crying. I then woke up in the hospital with a cast and bandages on my ribs. I still had the screams of my neighbor ringing in my ears. The police ended up asking my family questions. My family chalked it up to a robbery gone wrong. I also said it was a robbery because no one was going to believe me anyways. But I know what happened that night. Afterward, everything seemed to go back to normal, but I was still having nightmares every week. I eventually told them about that night, but they just told me that I was watching too many scary movies. A couple of weeks later, they found my neighbor's body. It was like the missing teenagers. But this time, in place of his intestines, was candy corn. A new family moved into his house a month later. Hopefully they won't have to experience that horror that I did on Halloween. I wish I could have done more to help him. And that was a story. That was quite a story. Out of spoopiness, I felt like it started off really good. And then I lost it. I held it together, but I'm sure in the bloopers you'll see I lost it when it said it really wanted the candy corn.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. I laughed the entire time because these stories are hilarious to me.
Anyways, I would rate this out of 1 spooky skeleton out of 5 spooky skeletons. 1 to 5 spooky skeletons. I would give this one a 2.5 spooky skeletons because the story started out strong. It felt like I was reading it from the POV of an 11th grader, which was the attitude I was trying to give you guys. But it lost me towards the end when it was getting candy corn and its intestines were candy corn. It lost me at that. It would have been a strong 3, but it lost me at the end there. So 2.5 spooky skeletons out of 5. Stoney, what would you rate it?
What's less than 1?
You can't do that. You would give
1.
it 1 spooky skeleton out of 5 spooky skeletons. All right, so now we are moving on to Stoney's his first creepypasta story.
My creepypasta.
And let's bring the camera in close and give you an intimate moment with Stoney.
My first story is called Halloween 64. I had heard rumors of the game's existence on various gaming sites and message boards, but I never thought it was actually real. I spent a little over a year trying to track down a copy, but I always came up empty-handed. That was until a few weeks ago, when the game decided to find me. I am here to beg you, do not go looking for it. If an unfamiliar game shows up on your door, leave it be. It can disguise itself under any platform and does not abide by the rules of our universe. If you are unfortunate enough to play it, I will provide instructions below to hopefully give you a fighting chance. The game decided to present itself to me on Sunday at 12 a.m. It had manifested itself into a blank Nintendo 64 cartridge with no writing or sticker logo, and was placed outside of my front door with no note or instructions. I paced around for 20 minutes and tried to comprehend where it had come from, and who had delivered it. Eventually, I hooked up my console and inserted the cartridge. My version of the game had titled itself Halloween 64, and included an inverted Nintendo logo. It had displayed a few presumptuously non-existent dev companies like Eulogy Inc. and Last Breath Software. The title screen included the words Halloween 64. Press start, and a text that made it look like a cheesy green slime. As soon as the game begins, you will be unable to quit until it's complete. I'm sure you're thinking, just turn it off, unplug it, or walk away. If only it were that simple. The game had several methods of self-defense, and the harder you tried to disrupt it, the stronger it became. The power function on the console will not respond if you try to turn it off. The red power light remains on and the system operates like normal. The cartridge cannot be removed. It does not matter how hard you pull on it, it will stay locked in place. If you annoy it enough, the cartridge will become scalding hot and burn your skin to the bone. In addition to this, all outside communication will be lost. Your phone and internet will not function while the game is running. Any door or window that leads to the outside world will be inaccessible. My front door wouldn't open, and all of my windows became shatterproof. To be honest, I'm not even sure if time passes while playing the game, as every clock in my apartment remained at 12 while playing. You will be given 10 lives. Certain aspects in the game will be mirrored in reality. Any pets you own will die as soon as you lose a life. As you lose more lives, you will get sick. Very, very sick. I became nauseous, my head started to pound, and my nose began to bleed. The more lives you lose, the worse you will feel. And if you keep playing, I can only conclude that losing lives will result in death. Level 1. The Neighborhood. Your third-person character in Level 1 is a child dressed in a skeleton costume, carrying a jack-o'-lantern bucket. You start off in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, covered in cheap Halloween decor. This street had a striking resemblance to the one I grew up on. I can only assume this is a detail that is different for each player. Although the street appears linear and endless, it is not. As you move forward, the streetlights behind you will go out. Do not go into the dark. Keep moving. If you move your character into the dark, you will lose a life. As you play, you will notice the darkness creeping up behind you in reality. After a few hours of running down the virtual street, all lights in my apartment went out one by one. Whatever you hear, see, or feel, it is important you do not take your eyes off of the screen during this level. You will hear doors in your home open and close, footsteps, and a familiar voice whispering in your ear. Do not lose concentration, or you will lose more lives. You may even feel a hand rest on your shoulder. Eventually, the level will end without notice. The timer on my screen showed that I ran for 7 hours and 26 minutes before completion. Level 2. The House. Level 2 is displayed in first person. You will enter a house with limited visibility, as a dim flashlight is your only source of illumination. As you progress through the level, you will notice a difference in temperature around you. My apartment was freezing, making it extremely difficult to concentrate. Again, you must keep playing. If you get up and try to adjust your thermostat or get a coat, you will lose a life. I lost 4 lives during this level and started coughing up blood. As you move through the house, you will discover various weapons. When you recover all of these weapons, you can progress to level 3. These weapons cannot be used in self-defense. It is best to not equip them, as your character will only use them to commit suicide, thus resulting in the loss of more lives. As you move through the dark house, you will hear and see things that will test your limits as a human being. I will not go into detail, but I saw and heard things in the game that were deeply personal, disturbing, and worst of all, genuine. Be prepared to witness every terrible experience of your past, all those things you have repressed, forgotten, and maybe even went to therapy to try to work through. Once again, you must keep playing, and you must collect every weapon. Level 3. Final. This one, like the last, is in first person. I entered this level with 2 remaining lives, almost certain that I was destined to fail. Like the former levels, I believe that it is custom tailored to the person who is playing. You will enter a bedroom and you will see a person lying on a bed, asleep. They may resemble a loved one, a friend, or even yourself. I saw the body of my best friend who passed away 10 years ago. You will have access to every weapon you grabbed in level 2, a knife, blowtorch, baseball bat, and screwdriver. Your objective is simple. Kill the person in the bed. They will not fight back. Once their health bar is diminished, you will win the game. I chose the knife and I walked up to the bed, aimed, and struck the body with the blade. White hot pain filled my eyes and I instantly discovered the catch of level 3. Whatever pain you inflict on that person, you will feel in reality. You will not lose any blood, you will not lose consciousness, and you will not die. But you will feel every single sensation. If you take too long in between blows, your player will lose a life. The person on the bed will beg you to stop. They will scream your name again and again. It took me 20 minutes to stab him to death. And I could barely hold the controller when it was over. I completed it with just 1 life remaining. My body was cold, frail, and broken. I remember reading "Game Complete" on the screen just before blacking out. I am not sure who the game will choose next, or if it is already chosen. I just pray that they will read this before it is too late.
Holy fuck. I really liked that one. Holy shit, that gave me the spookies. Oh my god. That was intense. That was very intense. That was like I didn't expect that.
Did you like how I read it?
That and I didn't expect the whatever happens to the person that you're doing it to happens to you with no like actual injuries. That's fucking scary. That's really terrifying. I would rate that 4 spooky skeletons out of 5. That's what I'm gonna rate it. I thought that was way better than the last one, but it still was like I could have had more, a little bit more to it, but it was a nice little short story.
Yeah,
but it was still scary.
It was a shorter story, but I don't know. I don't really rate it that high personally, just because I was reading it and I was like, I mean, okay.
You just didn't think it was.
I didn't think it was
spooky.
that. I didn't think it was that scary. But I mean, the premise could be a lot more fleshed out, and it'd probably be higher.
Yeah, if it was a little longer, it definitely but it definitely piqued my interest. It had me being like, "Oh fuck!" But that would be genuinely scary having to play a game and like you cannot stop. Like you have to keep going. Holy shit!
Yeah, no matter what you do,
Yeah, it's very scary. Are you kidding me?
you either live or you die. You either beat the game or you die.
That's very scary. That's so scary. All right, so on to the next creepypasta will be me. So for this next one, I really did enjoy reading this. Like I said, I picked 4 random ones that had decent readings and they weren't like an hour long. Stoney really wanted to read one, but it was 47 minutes long and I was not about to have him just sit there and read 47 minutes of it. It's a good one, but I picked 4 at random that had good ratings. These are turning out to be really good. That last one was awesome. This one I read through right before we started, so we kind of have an idea of what we're gonna read. I enjoy this one quite a bit, so let's hope that you guys do too. This one is titled 9 Rules for the Night Shift on Halloween Night at the Cemetery. You sure you have all those rules memorized? My boss said as he gathered his belongings to go home. Yeah, sure thing. I got them all up here, I said as I pointed to my head. He gave me a nod and headed out the door of the small office to go home. My boss was a little off, to say the least. This was my first month as a security guard at a cemetery right around the corner from my residence, and I had just gotten out of college about 3 months ago. This last month of shifts have been boring, sitting around, checking cameras, and doing rounds through the cemetery, making sure nothing is out of order. Exciting, right? I needed a source of income, and this was the best paying job I could find. No real experience needed, the flyer said. My take was that they were desperate to find someone fast, so I took advantage of that. I was hired the day that I found that flyer. Over the phone. I never even found out the guy's name. Once I came in on my first day, my boss gave me no training, no do's and don'ts, just a verbal list of 9 rules I had to follow and memorize before Halloween night. These rules are to be followed only on Halloween night, he said. You must follow these rules to the exact way that they are told to you. If you mess up, even a small part, well, you won't mess up, because I trust you to follow them word for word. I looked at him confused because this sounded almost like a threat. Nevertheless, I pulled out my phone and started an audio recording so he could record the list. Once he finished telling me the rules, I was absolutely in disbelief. This guy is insane. No wonder no one wants to work here. This guy is actually insane, I thought to myself. I know every place has a certain rules to follow, but to designate a set of rules, insane rules, for Halloween night only? I guess you won't know how I felt until I tell you the rules that he gave me, word for word. Exactly how he told me. Straight from the recording. Rule number 1. On Halloween night, please arrive at 8:30 p.m. No earlier, no later. Do not walk in these doors until it reaches 8:30. For the love of God, please. Rule number 2. Stay inside the office until 9:15. Do not leave. Keep yourself occupied, but do not check the security cameras during this time. I'll make sure to turn them off before you get here, so there's no temptation to peek at them. This might be one of the most important rules. If the monitor turns on by itself, do not look either. If for some reason you look and you see it has revealed the A section of the cemetery, you must turn off the lights of the office and hide. If it reveals the B or C section and you look at it, your only option is to run. Good luck with this. To make this easier, just cover the monitor with a jacket or a blanket, because you will not want to see what happens out there on this time on Halloween night. Rule number 3. After 9:15 strikes, you will have exactly 30 seconds to get out of the office. Leave the door unlocked. It is possible you will pass an unnaturally tall figure with no facial features. This is not a Halloween costume, and you must tell him good evening and look him right where his eyes would be. If he doesn't respond, continue on your way to patrol the cemetery. If he says anything at all, you must stand completely still. Do not move a muscle. He might walk around you, but if you keep still until he does, he should walk away with no problem. Go into the office and he will slam the door behind him. Rule number 4. You will make your way to Section A. Once you inspect Section A, you will realize the gravestone titled James R. Hackery is being dug up completely. This is not out of the ordinary. Do not, and I mean do not, pay any attention to what is inside the 6-foot hole in the ground. You will not see the rest of your shift if you look down that hole. Just keep walking to Section B and do not look back. Rule number 5. As soon as you cross the bridge from Section A to Section B, you will notice about a dozen shadow-like figures standing around in a circle around a big oak tree to the left of the bridge. Please listen closely to what I am about to say to you. You must find the figure wearing the black top hat. You will walk up behind him and ask, "Am I clear?" If you hear a voice from inside your head say continue, then you carry on to Section B. If you don't hear anything, you must wait. You can look over to the section at this time, but I recommend keeping your eyes down. Trust me. There will be no physical harm to you if you look, but I can't promise you will be emotionally intact after looking. Rule number 6. Once you get the go-ahead, continue on to Section B. You may walk around and do what you normally do every night here. The only catch is you must stay in the section until 10 o'clock p.m. It should be 9:30 to 9:45 by now, so you won't have to wait long. After the time crosses 10 p.m., no earlier, no later, continue on. Rule number 7. After walking out of Section B, you will notice a strange temperature change and lighting change. The time will have jumped to 2 a.m. after crossing. Do not panic, and please do not answer your phone. Your phone will be ringing constantly. As soon as it starts ringing, you will stand still and not move until it stops. It'll be calls from your mother, your father, your siblings, girlfriend, boyfriend, anyone you can think of. You must not answer these calls. It is not actually them calling. It is in fact the man that you saw earlier, the one with no facial features. He is trying to lure you back to the office. You must stay away from that office until I tell you to go back. Your phone will stop ringing after about a half hour, which leaves you around 2:30 a.m. You can continue on at this point. Rule number 8. You will notice another time jump. This one, 2 more hours from 2:30 to 4:30 a.m. If the time still says 2:30 a.m. after the calls stop, you are in trouble. Unfortunately, there is nothing you can do here. You messed up a step at some point if you end up here. You can finally finish your inspection of Section C. You must be prepared for a woman covered in blood to run up to you begging for help. She will be asking you where her baby is and if you can come help her, come fast. Do not be startled, no matter how loud she yells. Tell her you will meet her outside the cemetery in 10 minutes. And for her to wait for you there. She will run off in the opposite direction, and that's how you know you succeeded. There will be a lot of towels and rags all over the ground, covered in blood around Section C. This is the only maintenance you will have to do. Just pick them up and dispose of them in the waste bin closest to you. Rule number 9. After completing this final task, you must run back to the office. Do not look anywhere but ahead of you. You will see figures everywhere. You will hear your name being called from the voices that you think you will recognize. Just keep running. Once you reach the office, you will see a faceless man leaving the office building. It should be about 5 a.m. at this point. He will stop you and either say, "Good work," and nod at you, and you will slowly walk into the office and close the door. For the remainder of the shift, you can check the cameras, sit down, and go on with your shift until I come inside to start my shift. Or, he would say, "Come with me if He says, come with me. You will run and lock yourself in the office. Do not fall for his calm, monotone voice. He is anything but calm if you mess up. Do not let him in and wait for him to stop banging on the door. Once this stops, cover your eyes for the last hour of your shift. Do not look around until you hear 3 knocks on the door. This will be me to relieve you of your shift. You won't be called in for a few weeks to come to terms with what you have seen, and you will be paid handsome amount of money for your duties. So now that you've listened to the rules as well, I hope you can understand my initial suspicion and why I was so baffled. I thought this was a joke, and until I finished my shift. After I arrived at 8:30 p.m., my boss left, and I decided I was going to follow the rules given to me to humble him and be a good sport of the prank. I didn't check the cameras, and I headed out the door. After going outside, the brisk fall air hit me as I saw a tall man walking up to me. I looked at him, and he was actually faceless. It looked so real, and kind of gave me the creeps. I almost forgot to tell him good evening. He looked at me, well, I think he did, and continued on through the door. I shivered a little as I headed on straight to Section A. I arrived at the entrance and I searched for James R. Hackery's grave, a grave I always saw, as it was the biggest one there. To my disbelief, it was actually being dug up. I felt sick to my stomach that they would go this far to scare me, so I hurried past the grave as a wave of uneasiness came over me. This can't be real, I reassured myself as I headed across the bridge to Section B. I scanned for the oak tree, and when I finally found it, I noticed these figures my boss warned me about. I instantly spotted the one with the top hat. I unsteadily scurried over to him and asked, "Am I clear?" No answer. As I stood there, waiting for an answer that never came, I decided to look away from the man and peek over to Section B, because surely the pranksters wanted me to look since they warned me against it. I froze and felt pins and needles in my hands as I saw myself standing there in the distance. At least, what looked like me, except I was taller and covered in blood. As the figure was me, stared back, it let out a screech and started running towards me. I was startled and absolutely mortified by this and turned around to run. I looked back, and as it reached its arms out, it completely vanished. As soon as it vanished, I heard a voice within my head say, "Continue." At this point, I had a million thoughts running through my head as I started to realize whatever was happening was somehow impossibly real, and I felt my mind switching from confused to defense. I inspected the area until 10 p.m., constantly looking over my shoulder. I checked my phone and saw it was time to move on to Section 3. I felt exactly what I was told, a temperature change, and saw the surroundings get a little bit darker. It was noticeably colder. No way, I told myself as I reached for my phone, which displayed 2 a.m. Before I could form another thought, my phone rang right on cue and stopped dead in my tracks. "Dad," the phone displayed. I stared back at the phone as I looked at those 3 letters. I never knew my dad and definitely had never had him saved in my phone. I felt a tear form my eye because this was a very sensitive topic to me. I let it ring as I got lost in a trance of thinking about how on earth any of this was even possible. The ringing finally stopped and I let out a sigh of relief. I remembered the next rule about the time and opened my phone again, 2:30 a.m. I kept moving on with some stray tears in my eyes, watching my phone turn from 2:30 to 4:30 a.m. This was a relief to me because now that I knew this was somehow real, I realized I have done all the steps right so far. As I started inspecting Section 3 with cold fingers and numb toes, I heard screaming. Naturally, this scared the hell out of me, and I jumped out of my shoes. I snapped my head around to a blood-covered woman screaming, "My baby! I can't find my baby!" I told her, after a bit of hesitation, I told her to meet me at the entrance of the cemetery in 10 minutes. She nodded and ran off, and I noticed a ton of blood-covered rags all over the ground. Shaken up by her screams, I slowly picked up the rags and threw them out. I looked around and ran back to the office. The whole run, I didn't see anyone, I didn't hear anything, which was weird because my boss said otherwise. I'll count my blessings here, though, and find myself in front of the office finally. The man was leaving. This time, I looked at him in complete terror as he turned my way and said, "Come with me." I wasted no time running past him into the office and slamming the door behind me. "What did I mess up?" I yelled over the sound of banging on the doors, and as I pulled a jacket over my head, I shivered in fear for the entire hour until I heard 3 knocks on the door. I shot up, threw the door open to reveal to my boss, and yelled, "What in the hell did you put me through?" I was mad, although relieved to see him, who looked a lot more colorful and lifelike than he was in the past. He looked at me and smiled. "Go home, kid. Get some sleep." I yelled back, "No, I want answers. You cannot just tell me to go home after a night that I just had." He looked at me and said, "You took care of my cemetery, kid. I thank you for that." He held out his hand for a handshake. "The name James Randall Hackery, and I've been dead for 200 years. Every Halloween, I live the cemetery and recharge so my physical body does not perish. You covered me last night, and I thank you for that." It didn't take me long to recognize his name as the same on the gravestone that was dug up. I stared back at him, mouth wide open, speechless. I walked out that door, packed up my house, and never came back to this town again. So, Stoney, what'd you think of that one?
Spoopy.
You like that one?
Yeah.
You like that one, huh? I told you it was gonna be a good one. What would you rate 1 out of 5 spooky scary skeletons? What'd you give that one?
3.
You give that a 3?
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite part about that one?
No, I was just creative.
Just creative. Yeah. I thought it was really good. I think the ending felt a little bit rushed. I thought maybe that last paragraph.
Let's read all 9 rules and then boom, you're in the story.
No, I mean it was a good story and how it went through the steps. I appreciate that, but the finding out the boss, I wish it would have been a little bit longer of how he found out it was the boss. Which I thought that was a very creative story. I would give that one 4 spooky scary skeletons out of 5. I'll give that one. I really did like that one. Especially picking random and just like thinking that these are going to be good based on everyone's ratings. I thought it was really well done. I liked the rules and I enjoyed the structure of the story, but the ending could have been a little bit better. But we have one final story that's Stoney's going to read to you. So if you want to stay scared, this is also a very top-rated creepypasta. It's, I think, top 3 on their website. So if you want to read it again, remember, you can guys just look up the titles of creepypasta and you'll be able to read them too. So, Stoney, without further ado, lead us on into the next one.
For our final story, this one is titled Mr. Widemouth. During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river, never remaining in one location for long. We settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, and there we remained until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there are fragments in the attic of my brain which belong to the various homes we had lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless. Chasing another boy around in the backyard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft to float a creek behind the apartment we rented in Pennsylvania, and so on. But there's one set of memories which remains as clear as glass, as though they were just made yesterday. I often wonder whether these memories are simply lucid dreams processed by the long sickness I experienced that spring, but in my heart, I know they are real. We were living in a house just outside the bustling metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine, population 643. It was a very large structure, especially for a family of 3. There were a number of rooms that I didn't see in the 5 months we resided there. In some ways, it was a waste of space. But it was the only house on the market at that time, at least within an hour's commute of my father's place of work. The day after my 5th birthday, attended by only my parents, I came down with a fever. The doctor said I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for at least 3 more weeks. It was a horrible timing to be bedridden. We were in the process of packing our house and moving to Pennsylvania, and most of the things were already packed away in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day, and these served the function of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always loomed just around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head and compound my misery. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with mono. My first memory of the small creature was asking if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth, because his mouth was large. In fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body. His head, his eyes, his crooked ears, but his mouth was by far the largest. "You look kind of like a Furby," I said as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look. "Furby? What's a Furby?" he asked. I shrugged. "You know, the toy, the little robot with the big ears. You can pet and feed them almost like a real pet." "Oh." Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity. "You don't need one of those. They aren't the same as having a real friend." I remember Mr. Widemouth disappearing every time my mother stopped by to check on me. "I lay under your bed," he later explained. "I don't want your parents to see me because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore." We didn't do much during those first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by the stories and pictures they contained. The 3rd or 4th morning after I met him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face. "I have a new game we can play," he said. "We have to wait until after your mom comes and checks on you because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game." After my mother delivered more books and soda at the usual time, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under my bed and tugged my hand. "We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway," he said. I objected at first, as my parents had forbidden me from leaving my bed without their permission, but Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguishing feature was the window opposite of the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open. He then beckoned me to look at the ground below. We are on the 2nd story of the house, but it was on a hill, and from this angle, the drop was farther than 2 stories due to the incline. "I like to play pretend up here," Mr. Widemouth explained. "I pretend that there's a big, soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you'll bounce back up just like a feather. I want you to try." I was a 5-year-old with a fever, so only a hint of skepticism darted through my thoughts as I looked down and considered the possibility. "It's a long drop," I said. "But that's all part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. If it were that way, you might as well just bounce on a real trampoline." I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce back to the window on something unseen by human eyes. But the realist in me prevailed. "Maybe some other time," I said. "I don't know if I have enough imagination. I could get hurt." Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl, but only for a moment. Anger gave way to disappointment. "If you say so," he said. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived holding a small box. "I want to teach you how to juggle," he said. "Here are some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons." I looked in the box. It was full of knives. "My parents will kill me!" I shouted. Horrified that Mr. Widemouth had brought knives into my room, objects that my parents would never allow me to touch. "I'll be spanked and grounded for a year." Mr. Widemouth frowned. "It's fun to juggle these. I want you to try it." I pushed the box away. "I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to just throw in the air." Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid under my bed, remaining there for the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was under me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth often woke me up at night saying he put a real trampoline under the window, a big one that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but Mr. Widemouth persisted. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early in the morning, encouraging me to jump. He wasn't so fun to play with anymore. My mother came to see me one morning and told me I had her permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would be good for me, especially after being confined to my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put on my sneakers and trotted out the back porch, yearning for the feeling of sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting for me. "I have something I want you to see," he said. I must have given him a weird look because he then said, "It's safe, I promise." I followed him to the beginning of a deer trail which ran through the woods behind the house. "This is an important path," he explained. "I've had a lot of friends about your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path to a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day I hope to take you there." I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place lay beyond that trail. 2 weeks after I'd met Mr. Widemouth, the last load of our things had been packed into a moving truck. I would be in the cab of that truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I would be leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that perhaps the creature's intentions were not to my benefit, despite what he said otherwise. For this reason, I decided to keep my departure a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime, tomorrow with the help of an endless supply of coffee and a six-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man who was about to run a marathon rather than one that was about to spend 2 days sitting still. "Early enough for you?" he asked. I nodded and placed my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. "This is the last move, son. I promise. I know it's been hard on you, as sick as you've been. Once Daddy gets promoted, we can settle down and we can make friends." I opened my eyes as we backed out of the driveway. I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn on the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye, steak knife in hand. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to New Vineyard. The piece of land our house stood upon was empty except for the foundation, as the house burned down a few years after my family left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the living bejesus out of me, but I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone, somehow tied to that house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children.
Wow. I liked the structure of the story. However, it was also like the last story where the ending was like, meh.
Yeah,
Definitely that's the vibe that I got from that.
it's not my favorite story.
No. And that being like a top rated one too, wasn't I would give
Kind of
it
disappointing.
what would you be your spooky
2.
skeleton ratings?
2.
2 out of 5?
Only because the thought of some weird little thing called Mr. Widemouth.
That's creepy.
It's a little creepy.
It's very creepy. You gave a really good voice to it, so that also kind of like enhance the creepiness for me.
Jump out of the window. There's a trampoline below.
That's genuinely scary. I would give it also a 2 spooky skeletons out of 5 spooky skeletons because like I said, like the structure. The ending was a little bit goofy, but the concept of the creature would be terrifying at like 5. That would be so freaking scary to have this weird like gremlin-esque creature like asking you to like jump out a fucking window.
Be self-aware enough to be like, no, I probably shouldn't play with knives.
It's not a good idea. That was pretty bizarre and crazy. But we hope you guys enjoyed this creepy pasta story time. I definitely want to do more of these in the future. I just figured it'd be a great way to celebrate Halloween and be in character and read them to you guys. But yeah, I definitely would love to do more and like a little bit more lengthier ones. I thought that was a good timing because we did 4, but I know you have some that are your favorites that are really good, and I have to read more of the top ones that most of them are like 30 minutes long.
Yeah, because they're good stories. I want to read Ben Drown. It's such a long story though.
Ben Drown. That's what Stoney wanted to read, but it was like 60 minutes.
There's a certain nuance to it.
Yeah, but I thought the stories were great. Some of them were goofy. The concepts of them were good. I think people writing them, I think it's so cool when, people have these ideas to write and then you have a public forum. It's the same thing as with anything like fan fictions or smut, just anything. It's just more of just scary stories. And I love that there's a whole community based on that. And it's really nice to sift through. But yeah, picking 4 random ones, I think I did a pretty good job. They weren't too terrible. I hope at least you guys don't think they were too terrible.
Yeah, the best one was definitely the
cemetery one.
No.
The game one?
Yes.
The game one was pretty. I thought I thought that was the game one, the cemetery one, Mr. Widemouth, and then the candy corn goblin.
The intestines were candy corn.
That was really.
It's
really
all candy corn all the way down.
Oh my god. Well.
Okay, bye.
No. So. Hope you guys enjoyed this goofy ass episode. Stoney, where can the goofy people find you?
You can find me everywhere at Stoney Robbins or at Stoney Robbins _. Sometimes there's a 0, maybe not. Figure it out.
You gonna do me?
Where can the good people find you, Conway?
The good people can find me at ConwayTitty.com. That is Conway, TITTY.com. It's where all the links are at. You can come hang out on the stream with me and Stoney. We do play games on Twitch. We've been doing a lot of spooky games recently, which has been really fun. So if you're bored, come hang out on there. That's where you kind of can chat with us live and hang out and see Stoney just absolutely obliterate me, usually at any game that we play.
I try.
But the rest of my links are there as well. We also have an official website, theramblingpodcast.com.
Wow, we're so original with the name of our website.
the Ramblin', just an in.com. Ramblingpodcast.com. That's the sign. .com. That is where you can find everything. If you don't want to watch us on YouTube, or you don't want to listen to it only on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Podcast, Google Podcast, it's all there. All the links are there. The links to our pages are there too as well. Blah, blah, blah. Plug. Anyways, we hope you guys have a happy Halloween. I love spooky season. It is sad to see it come to an end.
Happy Halloweener.
But we hope you guys stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll
stay spooky.
Stay spooky, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.